I am Matt Wilhelmi, and I'm the owner of Strategic Voyages Business Consultants. I'm also the author of Taboo Business Questions, What is Haunting Every Entrepreneur's Growth? And today I'm joined by Francesca Kenney, CPA. She's a best-selling author, and Brian Keltner, international award-winning marketer, both from greenorchid.co, a consulting practice that takes a holistic approach to helping businesses. And today's topic has been really dialed into pitch decks and, how do we get money? Where does it come from? What is the people with the money? What do they want to see? And this specific instance is a family ran business with this idea of an event space. And we were kind of talking about this $7 million ask. They were trying to get money. Some of it was going to be for building a property. Some of it was going to be for hiring people and some other capital expenditures. Then we talked about cash flow, which is really important, right? You don't want to get into too much of the conversation without really understanding the business model. What do things cost? I think, Francesca, you had said they didn't quite fully know some of their costs and they didn't have a C-suite. And so some of these red flags started to pop up a little bit. And so I'm curious now, how does it work? Do you just take all of their information and set up a meeting in a boardroom somewhere in an ivory tower? Or is it a virtual call? Like, do you guys meet on a Zoom meeting? Like, what happens from here, Francesca?
So are you specifically talking about setting up the pitch deck or meeting with the investor? Where are we headed here?
Yeah. So let's say the pitch deck's done. You're like, hey, we have a PowerPoint. It's 10 slides or 5 slides or whatever it is. What happens?
Yeah. So then what happens is we look at the actual pitch deck, what the venue is or what the industry is. And then we go and match against investors that we know. And so we already kind of know who we're going to pitch to and speak with. We sit down, we have the owner present the slides. The C-suite usually is with them to be able to answer any specific questions that kind of dial into maybe what their expertise isn't. And by meeting with them, what winds up happening is there's more questions. Maybe they want a deeper dive on the financials. Maybe they want to see more information. Maybe they want to pass it off to other people that invest with them, but they only want a one-pager. And so we didn't talk about one-pagers. So they don't want to pass the whole pitch deck. They just want you to take that pitch deck that you did and summarize it into one sheet, which can be difficult to get all the information in, so that then they can circulate it to their group and see if there's interest to continue the conversation. So you asked, where does this happen? Sometimes it's a phone call. Sometimes it's a Zoom meeting. Sometimes we've had for this particular one, an investor showed up at one of the events and they started talking about what they were doing. And the investor said, I want in on this concept. I love this concept. So again, you never know where that investor's going to be. So that one wound up being a surprise for us, which was a nice surprise. But so it can show up in multiple different places.
Yeah. So when you're talking about arranging these meetings or these relationships, you guys are the matchmakers. And so part of it is vetting the business. And then the other side of it is vetting the VC or the person with the money, right? And so there's a process on both ends. So you get this list of potential investors, 5, 6, 7, 8, however many there are, they're interested. Is it like a free for all from there? Or is there like an arranged time and place to each one of those investors gets a chance to ask kind of their questions? What happens from there?
Yeah, it's very, very orchestrated, right? So you're going to have a set time. I like to find out what we're going to be asked before we get in there, so we're prepared. We spend time coaching the owner so that they are prepared to answer questions, make sure they understand every single slide. We also have the ability to take the owner and put them in a room of our people so that they can present to our people who are, again, very business savvy people, so that they can ask the questions. So it's almost like an interview, right? You're going to go get a job. you're going to practice your questions. And you're going to practice how you're going to answer it. I usually stand in front. When I used to do that, I would stand in the mirror, right? And I would rehearse. So we're going to make sure that they are well rehearsed before they go into that meeting.
And I think something to add on there is they don't come in blind. We talked a little bit about that, but I do a dossier on each of these investors, so they know what they're going to look like. I may have video for them to say, here's what they're going to sound like. Here's what's important to them. Here's their background. Here's why they're interested in your project. They're going to know all of that. We're going to cover all that before they even start doing the coaching.
So when we're thinking about this specific company, you said an investor showed up at an event. They were looking for $7 million. I kind of teased it in the last segment that I didn't tell, whether or not they got the money, but I'm curious if you could maybe explain that process of an investor saying, yeah, I am ready to give them the money. Then what happens? But I also want to know, how do you kind of let people down easy? Like, what does that process look like if maybe they don't get funding? And then finally, I'm curious, did they get the money?
Yeah. Okay. So let's go back to the first question. So the first question, you want to repeat that?
Yeah. So you've got this VC that is interested in giving the money.
Yeah.
Do they wire it to an escrow account? I guess how do you take that idea and then what happens from there?
So I think it depends on what it is, right? Are they getting equity? There's obviously legal documents that get drawn out. Is it more of a loan? How is it situated? If you're working with a bank, then there's bank documents. So you're going to have an attorney that's going to walk through this whole process. When everything is signed and agreed to, then they're going to transfer money to the bank account for the owner.
Okay. And so, I guess that last question is, what happens if there's a point where maybe an investor wants to pull out and they're not comfortable anymore? The red flags are just too many. How does that conversation go? It's almost like breaking up with somebody. You've kind of built this thing up and then you got to kind of let them down easy.
So my answer always to that is, what does your agreement say? Right? So it's going to be based on, what did you set up initially? Is there a personal guarantee? Is the land in jeopardy? What is tied to that agreement? And so that's where you want to be very careful that you understand what it is you're signing. What are those terms? This particular project, the owner owned all of the land. The event center was going on a piece of it. And we talked about separating out the 12 acres or so and making that its own parcel. So in case something went bad, they weren't going to lose their house. I mean, they could have lost their house, right? Depending upon what happened. But if you parcel the land out, it's at least a piece of land that's going with this event center. So again, what does the document say? That's what you're going to follow.
I'd love to pay off the T's here. Did they get the $7 million?
They did not.
No.
So what happened? Why didn't they get the money?
So part of it was proof of concept, right? So we talked a little bit about that. So they thought they were bigger than what they were. They didn't have everything, all their ducks in a row with what they needed to do. They also had personal financial issues.
Uh-oh. Surprise red flag.
Yeah.
And so how do you guys navigate that conversation when those surprises come up?
Unfortunately, when you're already down the road, then we're trying to do on the personal side, how can we fix this? What can we do? Do you have family that can help you out? What else can we do to make these situations go away? And so we had ideas, we had thoughts. It was going to mean somebody in the family was going to have to invest in the project to help them out. We were going to have to wait a few months, get the credit back to where it needed to be. But these are the questions that I wasn't anticipating with this person. And so when it came up, it was it was a shock.
Yeah, I would think when, you're especially that far down the path, right? That would be a little frustrating because it's almost like, man, like, why didn't you tell me on the front end? And I actually had one client once where I was trying to help them with a business deal, and the bank, wanted to see different financials, and I was trying to kind of coordinate some of that, and we get down the road where the bank did a credit check, and I don't do credit checks because I'm not a bank. So I mean, I just assume that if somebody's looking for a loan, they've kind of figured out they should have good credit. But then the bank pulled up their credit and wanted to know why there was a bankruptcy 2.5 years ago. I'm like, well,
Yeah.
but I mean, I don't know. I guess I'll go ask. The bank was like, why did you even show this to us? If you wouldn't, like, you should have known that they had a bankruptcy. And I'm like, how was I supposed to know? I don't ask people if they've ever had a bankruptcy. Maybe the bank does, but I don't. And so I asked the person if they knew anything about it, and what actually they didn't. It was identity theft, and it ended up being a really big thing. They didn't get the loan, right? But they didn't even know to tell me. So it was almost like a blessing that they figured it out, because then they were able to look into it. But asking some of those questions on the front end is just so important.
Well, but I just want to add, Matt, so you can go ahead and ask the question, but here's where it comes down to it. Prove that to me. So if you and I are having a dialogue and a conversation, and we're looking at everything that's going on, and you're telling me everything is beautiful and glorious, and that's fine. Show me what this is, because we're going to go down this path. And that's where the surprise came in.
And I think in trying to fix all of this is you can look at other ways to mitigate the damage that they've done to their personal finances, but also, is there a way of saving this deal? Maybe relooking at some of the other things, like parceling out the property, which for them was not an option. If it would have been, that might have been a way of saving the deal for them.
So long story short, they didn't end up getting the money. Sad ending to the story here, but I think it's a good ending from the perspective of the VC, right? They wouldn't have probably gotten paid back if there's personal credit issues, there's no CFO, there's no proof of concept. It sounds like a really risky deal that a VC maybe just determined, hey, like, the risk is not worth the reward, right? And so, maybe it's a happy story on the VC side, because I would imagine the VC doesn't want to give out the money and then find out all of these red flags. That would be even more frustrating. So I want to talk for a moment about greenorchid.co. Francesca and Brian, you guys do pitch decks. You guys are financial matchmakers. What are some services or that you guys provide that kind of help both sides of this matchmaking process?
Well, I think we start with how big of a deal is a pitch deck, and it's everything. And we've identified almost 40 different slides that a business could use, but you would never use that many. Which ones do you use? And so we'll identify it based on the end result. So begin with the end in mind, and then we start flowing that out and making everything else look branded so that it communicates well. I think also knowing what the pitfalls are gets them better prepared to answer our questions so that we can better help them. So we've done this. We talked about it a little bit before about the triple threat. And I think it's a piece we put out, and it's how to dodge the top 3 pitfalls for searching for VC funding. And so we've identified those. So that would be a great start for anybody who wants to venture in the venture capital world. Make sure you got that triple threat handled.
Yeah, when I think of a triple threat, I immediately think about basketball. I'm a basketball guy, right? And so it's it's pass, shoot, or dribble are the 3 threats. At least I think that's it. Hopefully my high school basketball coach isn't mad at me. But in business, you've got these top 3 pitfalls. So I'm assuming that's where the triple threat comes from. I'm not going to ask you to spoil, what the 3 are, but it's interesting that you've kind of presented it this way, because there's probably a million pitfalls if I had to guess, but there's always a top 3, right? So that's great. So that's a resource on your website, right?
It is.
That it is, yes. And to get there, it's greenorchid.co, and it's within the pitch deck tab. You can find it there, and it's the triple threat.
And is that the same website that somebody who maybe would want to be in your network of venture capitalists would go as well, or is that a separate website?
It
No.
definitely is. That's not. They can connect with us through there. We can start the process through there. They're not displayed. Those are our folks.
Sure, it's a
we want to
private
help others with.
relationship, right?
So yeah, their information's on a private scale.
Okay. And so today, we're talking about this pitch deck concept. We went through this case study. I really appreciate your time. I do want to ask you just one more question on the way out. If there's like a niche or a specific industry that you would say that you've seen maybe the most success with, is there one that comes to mind? Is it professional services? Is it retail? Is it website sale? Like where, or e-commerce, I should say, what is kind of like Francesca and Brian, you're like, man, we see VCs wanting more of these deals. What does that niche look like?
Can I answer, Brian?
Please go ahead.
So I'm going to say we have very deep ties with a number of organizations who want to fund women-owned businesses. And so men seem to get a lot of the funding, and women, it's just harder for them to get funding. And so we have a group of investors who would love nothing more than to fund women-owned businesses.
And is that really kind of like if it's a woman-owned manufacturing company, woman-owned tech firm, women-owned boutique retail store, like does it have any more delineation than that? Or is it just, if it's owned by a woman, we want to talk to them?
I think that would be the first. If you wanted to draw a second on there, I would say in the tech industry, just because I think it sounds sexy. I'm in tech, and so I really think a lot of the VC funders, that's a sweet spot for them. But women-owned businesses is also there, and they've even branched out. If they're a VC funder of tech, now they say, you know what, but I want to help more females and get that help them get their business going. They're willing to look at others. So it's not married female business owner with a tech industry. It doesn't have to be married that way. They'll look at it even if it's not tech.
I think you got to be careful when you're talking about women-owned businesses and the word married. But anyway, I think, that is kind of part of the matchmaking process, right? You're trying to match these VCs and they probably understand women in that capacity. But there's also a lot of research that indicates that women are actually more financially astute than maybe their male counterparts, given a lot of, controlled variables. Women are just better investors. And I don't know what that says about society in general, but that is just something that I think people maybe don't realize. But the savvy investors know that women just understand how to get it done. I think it's maybe a little bit more of just like the hardworking nature, the ability to understand relationships more. I think men are more transactional. I'm not trying to put my foot in my mouth too much here, but I do think that there's an aspect of women-owned businesses that's just innately different than male-ran businesses. So
it is different, and I will say this, that there are more female entrepreneurs every year in the United States than men, and they're killing it. They are absolutely killing it by any metrics. If you want to look at any of the numbers, they're doing a fabulous job, but yet they're getting less than 3% of the VC money that's out there. So 97% are going to the men. And I think we can change that with our network.
So Francesca and Brian, thank you so much for spending some time with me today, talking about pitch decks and going through, this case study of this event space, family ran business that was looking for a $7 million, VC fund. I really appreciate your time. I'm looking forward to connecting with you guys more. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks so much
for having us, Matt.
Appreciate it.